All right. Hello, stars. Mwah. Thank you guys and gals so much for your subscriptions. And I want to thank you for joining me for today's live stream. Today, I'm going to be talking about narcissists, but also we're going to be talking about being exposed to high adversity. Actually, we're going to be talking about how children who are exposed to high adversity, basically, this can have a lot to do with some of the health issues that they end up having, especially later in life when they become adults. So I'm going to be going over a few notes, but before getting into the presentation, I again just want to thank everybody for joining me, and I want to also, pardon me, feel like I had a frog in my throat. Pardon me. But anyway, I want to just thank everyone for joining me today. Now, I'm going to make sure that today's live stream is not very lengthy. Sometimes when I get going with the live streams, we're on for about 2 hours. Today, I'm not going to be able to go for that long. So again, thank everyone. I just want to thank everyone for joining me today. And we're going to try to make this about an hour. I know I said that on the last live stream, but I had a little bit more time on my hands to go with the live stream. But today I'm going to have to cut it to about an hour. Okay. So if you have questions, please send them to my email. Of course, I welcome comments. And of course, anyone who's in the chat room, of course, I would love it if you all interact with each other and, just enjoy the live stream. Okay. But again, I'm going to be talking about early exposure to high adversity, which influences a high amount of or a toxic amount of stress, which can lead us right into having particular health issues later in life, basically as adults. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Please mind the description box below. There you will find the link to the slide presentation. And you will also find the link to the slide presentation in the chat room. Okay, so just scroll up to the beginning of the chat and you will find the link to the slide presentation, which has my notes as well as, basically the slide presentation is there for you if you would like to read along. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. And if this is your first time joining us for Luminousz Star, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for the stream. And hopefully you will come back, but as a star. Okay, you're already a star, but hopefully you will come back and be a part of our star family. Okay, so now getting right into the presentation. And again, if you have questions, please send them to my email. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to go for about 2 hours on the live stream. Okay, but no worries. There's more live streams coming up. All right, early exposure to high adversity influences toxic amounts of stress. All right, so the topics of discussion is going to be going past the obvious reasons why childhood trauma is not your fault. The second topic, the cortisol effect, impaired hippocampus and overactive amygdala. Third topic, narcissists are supplied when the primal emotions play out primitive defense mechanisms. The last and final topic is going to be dysfunctional relationships with narcissists, and those with a close personality might trigger unpleasant emotions and thoughts, which influences negative reinforcements. Now, I know that last topic was a long, drawn out one, but I promise you, I'll be able to summarize it for you, okay? Okay, moving right on along to the first point. It might seem cliche to some when others state that it is not his or her fault for being mistreated as children by narcissistic parents and or grandparents. Okay, so again, sometimes we may be talking to a trusted friend. We may be speaking to another family member who is a little bit more objective about our experiences as children at the hands of a narcissistic parent. Sometimes we hear that particular cliche type of statement, "It's not your fault." Okay, this one I've even heard. Okay, a lot of us has heard this one. But when we're talking to someone about some of the things that we have experienced as children, which may have resulted in childhood trauma, we hear that particular statement, "It wasn't your fault." But in today's live stream, I really want to get into the science of why it really wasn't your fault, other than the obvious. You were a child. Of course, it's not your fault because the parents set the tone for the parent-child relationship. So we're going to get into the science of why it really wasn't your fault, other than the obvious. You were a child. So of course it wasn't your fault that your narcissistic parents or grandparents behaved a particular way. Okay, so we're going to really get into that today. Second point, obviously children do not set the tone for parent-child relationships due to being children. However, it may prove to be more of a relief to realize the science behind why it is not the fault of a child when narcissistic parents and diabolical tactics for narcissistic parents engage in diabolical tactics for narcissistic supply. So again, we may be talking about grandparents. Some grandparents may have a cluster B personality. Some of your grandparents may have a narcissistic personality. When they began to pull shenanigans, when they began to engage in diabolical tactics in order to obtain the narcissistic supply, see, children, they feel a particular way, but what I just stated, they're not going to be able to articulate that. They may be 5 years old. They may be 4. They may be 3. They feel a particular way, though, about what they're experiencing. Okay. And some people may debate that. That's fine. But a child that age, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they're going to be feeling a particular way. Those experiences that they're having at the hands of their narcissistic parents, it just doesn't go away. Just because they're that young, just because they're, 3 or 4 or 5, then all of a sudden, by the time they're 18, they're going to forget. No, that's not how it happens. Our bodies absolutely remember. We do a lot of things to forget what we go through, right? Especially when it's painful, but our bodies memorize it. Our bodies have a conscious and basically a mind of its own. Okay. The body remembers every touch, every kiss, every, other types of experiences, right, that you have had. The body remembers. We may drink, we may smoke, we may take a particular, we may do something to try to forget, basically, but our bodies never forget, even though we try to forget particular painful memories. Even though the narcissist or the cluster B personality, they may do things to trigger, they may say things to trigger those particular memories, but the body does not forget. This is exactly why a lot of us become triggered when the narcissist or cluster B personality starts pulling shenanigans that may have us remembering or may influence it. It may influence certain painful memories, right? So this is often why the narcissist and cluster B personality, they obtain the supply. They obtain the narcissistic supply whenever the person who may be the targeted prey, or it may be the child, right? They're being triggered. So they're remembering certain painful memories. The narcissist is going to, they're going to collect the supply. They're going to get the narcissistic supply because the other person, if they're not reactionary, right? They're remembering certain things. They may feel particular emotions such as sadness or anger. They may feel both of those things. The bottom line is this. Another way to look at emotions is to say that emotions are energy in motion. So whenever you're expressing your emotions, whether it's sadness or anger, right? Whenever you're expressing those emotions, the narcissist likes to exploit your capacity to do so. So this is often why narcissists and cluster B personalities, they like to goad people into arguments. They like to start or instigate drama and conflicts, because when we are engaged in that with the narcissist, we're going to feel and think a particular way. And that's the point. The narcissist would like to feed from that. And they often do. They get the narcissistic supply because the person that they're targeting is either going to become reactionary, or he or she is going to feel a particular way, and they may express to the narcissist that they're angry, that they're sad. And there's nothing wrong with expressing what's going on. The bottom line is this: the narcissist and cluster B personality, they like to goad people into arguments. They like to what's another word I can use? They like to get people heated. Okay. They like to get a rise out of people. That's another phrase. Those are some other choice words that we can use. The narcissist just likes to, get people riled up, basically. So he or she can obtain a narcissistic supply. And of course, so their false self-image is thriving and surviving at your expense. Okay. Nobody likes that, right? But anyway, all right, let's move on. The brain structure, hormonal system, immune system, and DNA reading, as well as the body development of children, are adversely affected by early exposure to high adversity and toxic amounts of stress. The human body remembers trauma. While people may do many things to forget events that have caused trauma due to exposure to adversity. So as I stated before, there could be certain memories that we have right now that we haven't thought about in a long time. Bring a narcissist into the room. Bring a cluster B personality into the room who's trying to get you to remember. And then it would be amazing what you can remember. The narcissist and cluster B personality, sometimes it's like they have a sixth sense about exactly which buttons they know how to push. And before you know it, you're reactionary. Before you know it, you're thinking about things that you haven't thought about in a long time. That's very painful, maybe even traumatic. The narcissist and the cluster B personality, again, their aim is to make sure that their false self-image is thriving and surviving at your expense, at my expense, and at whomever they may target, or have as a targeted prey. Maybe even as a primal, a primary source supplier. Okay, that could be family. Who is a primary source supplier? It could be a spouse. It could be a family member. It could be a close friend. Okay, so those are primary source suppliers of a narcissist or a cluster B personality. They tend to really target those individuals for source supply because they're the easiest to obtain the narcissistic supply from. This is unfortunate, though, because this is also why a lot of narcissists and cluster B personalities, they're very good at hiding exactly how they treat those who are closest to him or her. Okay, they can be very covert about this. Okay, so let's move on now. The brain structure and the hormonal system, the immune system, the DNA reading. Okay, all of this, when the child is being adversely affected, they're facing high adversity, which could be narcissistic abuse. Some people may debate that. They may say, well, oh, that's not a high adversity, but I'm pretty certain there's a lot of people that would say quite to the contrary. They would debate that and say, well, no, when a child is facing high adversity, that, let me reword that. When a child is facing narcissistic abuse, that could be seen as high adversity. Absolutely. Because high adversity causes toxic amounts of stress. Then we are going right into the health issues that one could face later in life, such as heart disease, okay, hepatitis. They may be showing signs of complex PTSD rather than PTSD. Okay, so a lot of people have been diagnosed with PTSD, but when you look into their childhood, they may have faced high adversity, such as narcissists in their families. They may have grandparents. They may have parents who either have a cluster B personality or they have a narcissistic personality. But this is easily overlooked. It's amazing how a lot of people overlook that. Okay, so this is what we want to talk about also in the live stream today. All right, so let's move forward. Now, we're going to talk about cortisol. Cortisol. All right, get a little water in me. All right, loosen up the tongue a little bit. Now, what is cortisol? Cortisol is a stress hormone that is released into the brain. Now, this is what we're going to talk about. There's the hippocampus and there's the amygdala. Okay, so the hippocampus tends to be damaged. whereas the amygdala is overstimulated as soon as that cortisol hits it. Okay, so now we're talking about different parts of the brain, the hippocampus and the amygdala. Cortisol absolutely affects it. The amygdala is usually overly stimulated, okay, or it's overactive, whereas the hippocampus tends to become less effective because it actually is shrinking. It's actually being damaged by too much cortisol. Cortisol, again, is a stress hormone. Cortisol has the potential to impair the hippocampus while overstimulating the amygdala. Due to an overactive amygdala and altered hippocampus, one may focus more on his or her emotions rather than critically thinking about what's going on in the relationship with a narcissist and a cluster B personality. So let's just say, for example, the narcissist and the cluster B personality, they begin to goad you into an argument. Again, this is just an example. You're probably going to be triggered. Okay, you may have certain unpleasant emotions such as anger. Now, more than likely, and again, this is just an example, you may become reactionary. And why is that? Because the amygdala is overstimulated, is overactive. And this is, again, due to the cortisol, the stress hormone. This is what we're talking about, the toxic amounts of stress due to facing high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. So at the same time, your hippocampus is being altered, is shrinking. Okay. And again, this is just an example. So basically, the cortisol, what it does to the hippocampus, it shrinks it, it alters it, it damages it. So this is going on at the same time. So this is why a person tends to become more reactionary when they're dealing with the narcissist and or cluster B personality, especially when they're being goaded into an argument. When the narcissist is intentionally trying to stir up some sort of drama, trying to upset the other person. Okay, so this is what's going on. And again, this is a stress hormone, cortisol, hitting a specific part of the brain, the hippocampus and the amygdala. So when that person is reactionary, they're stuck in between the fight and or flight. The fight and flight is being activated as well. So that person, you know, they're now that the narcissist is targeting him or her, goading them into an argument, they're reactionary. They're going off now, or they may be going in on the narcissist, and the fight is on, and the narcissist is happy. They're beaming because they're getting supplied. Okay, so I just wanted to really paint that picture because some people, they don't understand how is it that the narcissist and a cluster B personality is like they have a sixth sense and they know exactly what buttons to push to have you going off, you know, and not saying that this is totally their responsibility, because we all have that free will to choose how we're going to respond or react, or, you know, what's going on with us. Unfortunately, the dysfunctional relationship with a narcissist, this is what makes it so dangerous. A person who has a background with already being exposed to high adversity, such as narcissism or narcissistic abuse, if they're currently as an adult in a relationship with a narcissist or a cluster B personality, this is just going to reinforce certain things, such as memories of having already been traumatized in childhood. So now that the hippocampus and the amygdala has been altered, you have one part of the brain that is overly stimulated, and then you have another part of the brain that is underactive, you know, or is not as is not operating properly. Like right now, my mouth, you know, I'm talking and it sounds like I'm confused. Anyway, you guys and gals, I hope you get the point. You have one part of the brain that's overly stimulated, so it's overactive. That's the amygdala. The other part of the brain, it's not operating enough. So you have one part of the brain that's operating too well or too much. You have another part of the brain that is not working as well. Okay, this does not mean that person is retarded, and I don't even like that word retarded. It doesn't mean that they're retarded, stupid, dumb. No, we're narrowing it down to the science, to the science. Okay, we're narrowing this down to the science of why it is that it's really not a child's fault when they are suffering at the hands of a narcissistic parent. It's really, we're getting to the science of it. We're going beyond the cliche statement of it's not your fault. Okay, so we're just really breaking it down here. Why is it the child's fault other than the obvious? They were children. The parents are responsible for how they treat the children and raise them up and make sure that they are upstanding adults. Okay, so when the hippocampus and the amygdala is being altered by the cortisol, then this person, when they're in the midst of the narcissist or cluster B personality being goaded into an argument, he or she more than likely will become reactionary. This is not guaranteed. However, the person, they're probably going to become reactionary. It's easy for him or her to become reactionary instead of just responding. Okay, so that's the choice. That's the choice. The person can respond to the narcissist or cluster B personality when they're being goaded into an argument. However, when the amygdala is being overly stimulated, pardon me, they're probably going to go ahead and become more reactionary because the amygdala, it controls, or it controls the part of, well, it controls our emotions such as fear, hatred, lust, and love. Okay, these are some primal emotions that we all have. So this is where the amygdala comes in. Okay, so when the hippocampus has been damaged, this is where more of our left brain comes in, or our thinking. This is where this is where we tend to be more critically thinking, or thinking critically, or just thinking more. Okay, this is where the hippocampus comes in. So when the information is being received, what is the information? The information is the narcissist and or cluster B personality is trying to goad us into an argument. They may be saying a few choice words that's not very pleasant. And before you know it, there are certain thoughts that's coming into mind. There are certain emotions that's being felt due to the narcissist or cluster B personality attempting to obtain narcissistic supply by way of goading a person into an argument. So with the hippocampus not really working as it ought to, or is not functioning to its best, that person is not really critically thinking about what's going on at that time. Of course, they realize that they're being goaded into an argument. My overall point is the pendulum is going to swing over to the emotional side, where that person, they may feel hatred. They may feel love. Well, if they're being goaded into an argument, they're probably not going to feel love at that moment, but they may love the narcissist and or cluster B personality. So the pendulum being swung over to the emotional side, they're more than likely to become reactionary rather than critically thinking about what's going on and responding to the narcissist and or cluster B personality. I hope that makes sense. So when the pendulum is swinging over to the emotional side due to the amygdala being overly stimulated, because again, what does the amygdala do? It helps us with those emotions that we feel that are primal emotions: love, hate, fear, and lust. That's where your amygdala comes in, and it's overly stimulated. This is why we may we may be reactionary rather than being responsive. So when a person is responsive, that means they have critically thought about the narcissist and cluster B personality trying to goad them into an argument. And then they go into, well, I don't like the narcissist and cluster B personality doing such and such, or I don't like what they're saying. So you're critically thinking about it rather than just going over to the emotional side. And then before you know it, you're reactionary. And the narcissist is eating all that up. So again, this is due to an overactive amygdala and the hippocampus not working or functioning as it ought to. Okay, it's not functioning at its best because the cortisol is damaging it and it's keeping the amygdala overly stimulated. So when the narcissist and cluster B personality goes in on a person, or they're trying to goat them into an argument, or they're pulling shenanigans, that person who may feel love, they may feel a connection. See, now we're talking about the emotions again. They may feel a connection to the narcissist or cluster B personality, such as their parent, such as their grandparents who may have a cluster B personality or a narcissistic personality. They're more prone to become reactionary. They're less likely to critically think about what's going on at that moment. This is tough for any of us to do, even if we're not dealing with a narcissist or cluster B personality. I've had moments where I've slipped up. Absolutely. I wasn't critically thinking about, at that moment, okay, I don't like what this person is doing. I don't like what they're saying and blah, blah, blah. I was just in the moment. So I'm not, trying to make the point that we're not ever going to be in the moment. And then we're just going to feel and express what we're feeling at the time and what we're experiencing. Of course, we do have choices to express our experiences at any given moment. However, when it comes to narcissism and cluster B personality, it's just, and I'm speaking from experience, it's just best to train yourself to become more responsive rather than reactionary. Okay, because what does responsive mean? Responsive means you're being responsible for your own feelings and your thoughts and whatever, right? The narcissist and cluster B personality, they're not going to like that because that is a clear sign that they're not in control. You are. So when you're responding, you're being responsive. You're being responsive about what's going on with you, what you're thinking, what you're feeling at the moment that the narcissist is trying to mess with you. They're trying to goat you into an argument, right? So you are choosing. See, that sounds very powerful right there. That's your personal power right there being exercised. You're choosing to respond rather than become reactionary, because when you're reactionary, the narcissist likes that because they know you're not in control of what you think or what you feel, even though you may feel like at the time you're going in on them and you're telling them a few choice words, right? And it feels powerful, but the narcissist is grinning on the inside. Matter of fact, they're beaming on the inside, and sometimes literally, because you're displaying what their false self-image wants to see, and that is you're not in control. You're not in the driver's seat. You're not in control at all. They can say a few choice words and do something and you're off. You're reactionary. And this is understandable because what you're experiencing is real. You have every right to express that. What I'm pointing out is when the narcissist goat you into an argument, they're looking for you to become reactionary because that's a clear sign to him or her that you're not in control. You're not exercising your personal power. They're in control and they want to continue to be controlled, to have control over your life. And they want to make sure that you're being controlled. So when we become responsive, then that takes away from the narcissist. Okay, so and it takes time. It takes time and practice to get to the point where when right in the middle of it, you can start thinking about, okay, I don't like how the narcissist, is going off, or I don't like what they're saying. I don't like what they're doing. And see, that's when you're critically thinking about what's going on instead of just becoming reactionary, right? And it takes time. It takes practice to do that. But I really wanted to point out the amygdala and the hippocampus, those parts of our brains that if there's a history of childhood trauma, that's absolutely related to narcissistic abuse. Well, this is why. This is how this happens. This is why we become more reactionary than being responsive, especially when we're having relationships right now with narcissists and cluster B personalities. And this is also why it is so easy for them to push those buttons, because those buttons are unresolved childhood issues. What are some of the unresolved childhood issues? Being called names by the narcissistic parent, not being approved. Whenever you did get something right, the narcissistic parent still tore you down. They still insulted you. And it's like, well, I can't really do anything right. You know, you may be feeling like, well, I'm unworthy. And all of this, again, is stemming from childhood trauma. All of this, again, is stemming from some of the experiences you may have had due to having narcissistic parents or even grandparents. So the narcissist that's in your life right now, this is why they tend to have a sixth sense of which buttons to push. And the next thing you know, you're reactionary. Okay. And this is why it's just very easy for them, or seemingly it's easy for them to do that, because there are unresolved childhood issues. And those things can vary from being called names by your own parents to being disapproved by siblings because the parents have trained the siblings to not love you or care about you or to approve of you and pretty much bully you when you were a child. And again, these are just examples. But the bottom line is this: whenever there's an unresolved childhood issue, the narcissist and cluster B personality, they are like vultures. Okay, they're just like buzzards looking for the roadkill. Okay, and they're looking to dig in. They can sniff this out. Okay, so the narcissist and cluster B personality that's in your life right now, they probably know certain things from your childhood that continue to go unresolved for you. Number one, maybe because in the conversation you shared this. Nothing wrong with sharing, with people that you feel that are trustworthy. Unfortunately, the narcissist and cluster B personality, a lot of us find this out too late, that they're not trustworthy. And this is how you can just train yourself to respond rather than become reactionary. It's a part of the healing process. It's a part of when you have that support base and you're being encouraged to take one step at a time. And before you know it, you become better and better at making that choice. I'm not saying that you're wrong for making the choice. No, what I'm saying is you're exercising your personal power. So when you do make that choice, you don't feel hopeless. You don't feel had by the narcissist. You don't feel that rug being pulled out from under you. You're practicing your personal power. So even if you do choose to go off on the narcissist and instead of being responsible, you do go ahead and say, well, you know what? I'm going to tell this person a piece of my mind. I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. So even when you do make that choice, you're still not feeling hopeless. You're not feeling like you've been had. Okay, because you've made that choice. You're practicing personal boundaries. You are practicing assertion. You're practicing self-preservation, emotional discipline. Now, the emotional discipline might be a little rusty, okay, if you choose to go in on them. But the bottom line is this: you're making that choice. You're practicing your own, your personal power. Exercising your personal power. That's very important, because when a narcissist sees that you are gaining your mojo back, they're going to be very upset. Okay. They're going to be shaken by that, because their false self-image cannot survive. It cannot thrive with your taking your personal power back, because their false self-image may be that of a person who's cool, calm, and collected and has all the answers, right? That might be one of their false self-images. The narcissists and cluster B personalities, they have many false self-images. And again, it may be that they're this cool, calm, collected person. So if you choose to respond rather than become reactionary, well, then now, who looks like the cool, calm, collected person in the room? You do. And watch the narcissist and the cluster B personality become reactionary. See, it switches. More than likely, they're going to become reactionary, because they're not going to like you stealing the spotlight. You're stealing the show. You're stealing their thunder. They want to come off being the cool, calm, collected one. But if you're being the cool, calm, collected one when they're trying to goat you into an argument, well, then the rug gets pulled out from under them, not you. So this is why I say, you can practice it. And it takes a little time to get to the point where it tends to naturally come to you, to just, because I know that's what happened with me. You have to practice. You just have to be willing to practice that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next point now. The function of the amygdala controls basic emotions such as fear, love, and hate. An overactive amygdala causes one to obsessively focus upon shenanigans and diabolical tactics of the narcissist and narcissistic personality, which may frequently place him or her in a maladaptive state of flight and or fight mode. Okay, so we talked about the flight and fight mode. Okay, now I'm going to touch on that again. So when a person is facing a particular situation, if the narcissist and narcissistic personality is pulling shenanigans, and this is an example, this person is being triggered. So there's certain thoughts that's coming to mind. There's certain emotions that's coming to mind. Let's just say they're not feeling the love right now. The narcissist is going in on him or her. So they're probably not really feeling the love right now for the narcissist. But this is a relationship, even though it's a dysfunctional relationship. This is a person. The narcissist is a person that you feel that there's a closely knit relationship, or you're feeling a deep connection. I'll put it that way. You feel a deep connection because the dysfunctional relationship is absolutely, that's something that some people, believe it or not, they don't really pay attention to. Why is that? Because the narcissist and cluster personality, they're so good. Okay. They're very good at charming. They're very good at the seduction. So they know how to pull on the heartstrings. They're very good at this. Okay. So the person who's in the dysfunctional relationship with the narcissist, they're not going to be paying attention to certain things that may be right before them. Okay. It's right there, but they totally overlook it. And this is not because they're stupid. This is not because they're dumb. No, because they feel a certain connection to the narcissist and a cluster personality. We may be talking about a narcissistic parent. We may be talking about a narcissistic grandparent. So the connection, the strong connection is going to be there. So this is exactly why a lot of us totally overlook certain clues, right? That really we need to pay attention to, because this is what's going to help us come out of the sunken place. This is what's going to help us get gain our mojo back. This is how we're going to be able to become more responsive rather than reactionary. Because when a person is reactionary, that means they're acting out what's going on. They're acting it out. And emotions are energy in motion. We're all comprised of energy. So when we start to express our emotions, and the narcissist is right there, they're there salivating. They're ready to eat all of that up. Because for one thing, they feel like that they're controlling us. They're able to push buttons. So they like the fact that they have affected us in a certain way. Okay, I hope that's starting to make sense, because this is why narcissists seem to calm down after they have been successful in goading us into an argument. Okay, because they're getting fed. And on top of that, their false self-image is beaming. Their false self-image looks like, again, they're the cool, calm, collected person in the room. And you're the one that's being reactionary. You're going off. You're going in on him or her. So onlookers are looking at you like, okay, what's wrong with this person? And the narcissist is just sitting back beaming because they've accomplished their goal. And that is to obtain the narcissistic supply while making sure that the false self-image thrives and survives. Okay, and this happens all too often. But I really wanted to point that out because the connection with the narcissist and cluster personality is very key in this particular point here. So when the amygdala, no, that's not what I wanted to say. These emotions that we feel, such as love, hate, maybe even lust and fear. All right. So these are emotions that we all feel. The narcissist and cluster personality, they really like to tap into those emotions. So when we become reactionary, again, that means we're acting out. We're out of control. We're not controlling what we're thinking or feeling at that time. The narcissist is in control. Hate to put it that way, but that's what it is, because the person is being reactionary. When they choose to be responsive, they're taking full responsibility for their own mind and their own heart, what's going on with him or her. So not only are they critically thinking about what's going on, they understand exactly what they're feeling at the moment. And they're able to speak on it or articulate it or to express to the narcissist or whomever may be around what's going on with him or her. I hope that makes sense. And just by me stating this and you all listening to that, I hope it's starting to, really uplift your heart, because you have that choice. You have free will to make those choices. The narcissist and cluster B personality really cannot do anything to a person that's not allowed. They can manipulate. They can pull all types of shenanigans, but they need someone else to co-sign. They need the cooperation of the other person. And when the narcissist focuses in on people, sometimes the very thing that they look for is, has this person been traumatized in their childhood? There, I said it. Because this is what it really boils down to. A lot of narcissists and cluster B personalities, they tend to focus in on people that may be giving off the signals that he or she has unresolved childhood trauma or unresolved painful childhood issues. It may not be trauma. It just may be, again, feeling unworthy, feeling like they're not loved because of certain experiences they may have had at the hands of their parents or someone else in their family. It could be that. The bottom line is this: most narcissists and cluster B personalities, they look for people that have a background of unresolved issues that are very painful. Okay, and again, that could be childhood trauma. So these are certain things that I wanted to really point out, because I know, again, some of us have heard, some of those statements like, oh, it wasn't your fault what happened to you. And again, it's pretty cliche, but I think most people mean well. They're very sincere when they say it. However, when you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, and that is some of the pain that goes unresolved, hearing that particular statement, it wasn't your fault, it really doesn't penetrate too much. It does well, yes. But I just think that it penetrates deeper when a person understands the science behind why it isn't his or her fault when they have suffered trauma at the hands of narcissistic parents. I just really think it goes further. It goes deep. It's deeper. It's just, I just think it's better. Okay. When a person really understands, oh, okay, so the, amygdala and the hippocampus has been, those parts of my brain, or that person that I know and love, that those areas of their brain have been altered because of a toxic amount of stress. We're talking about the cortisol again. Okay. So this can happen. Basically, what I'm saying is that this can happen to anyone. This has happened to a lot of individuals. So the next time somebody wants to put you down because maybe, you're not behaving in a way that they may understand, they want to put you down because, maybe you're giving off the signals that you really don't think that you count. So they hone in on that, or they capitalize off of that by making you feel worse. The next time that happens, just remember what I just said. There's a science behind, okay, why it isn't your fault. Okay, it really isn't your fault that the narcissistic parents chose to behave like they did, and how some of them continue to behave, and how you have internalized that, or how you have experienced your parents who may have a cluster B personality or a narcissistic personality. That's not your fault. So there's some science behind that now. So you don't have to continue to carry that. Okay. So, and believe it or not, sometimes this is how some people continue to carry the shame and or guilt of the dysfunctional behavior of narcissistic parents. Okay. And it wasn't their fault. Even though they may have heard that cliche statement again, oh, it wasn't your fault. But now they have something to go to and say, okay, this is really why it wasn't my fault. Okay, because now I can research this. So I really wanted to share that with you all today. And I certainly hope that you will find this information very helpful. So when the activation of the fight and flight happens, so that's what's activated a lot of the times when we're facing stress or something that has triggered us, such as a traumatic event that we may remember or a traumatic event that we're actually in the middle of. So there's the fight and there's the flight activation, right? So when that's maladaptive, that means it's not working properly. It's not as effective. It can actually work against the person. Okay, so when it's adaptive, when we're in danger, right? The fight or flight is activated. So we want to get out of danger, right? We want to get to safety. We want to protect ourselves. When it comes to the cluster B personality parents who may be going in on their child, in other words, they're engaging in diabolical tactics to obtain the narcissistic supply from their children or a particular child who's been targeted. That child is going there again. The fight and flight is going to be activated at that moment. That child may become a child who has all thumbs and 2 left feet, and they may become tongue-tied. In other words, they may do more to get themselves in trouble with the narcissistic parent or the narcissistic grandparents because the fight and flight mode has been activated. So that child wants to try to get themselves out of danger. They may become confused. They may become hurt, angry. They may feel sad. And again, the narcissistic parents are going in on the child. So the fight and flight mode is activated. Due to the cortisol, okay, hitting the hippocampus part of the brain and the amygdala part of the brain. What's going to happen with that child at that moment? They're going to be more in trouble. They're going to say things that may make the narcissistic parents go off more, when in their minds, they may be trying to protect themselves. This is the child I'm speaking of. The child is trying to protect him or herself. They're trying to make all of the madness stop, all of the chaos stop. They want to bring peace, right? Everything that child may say at that point may just really, really trigger the parents. And this is not the child's fault. The things that the child may do may anger the narcissistic parent even more. While all the while inside of the child, the mind of the child, he or she wants to stop all the madness. They want to calm everything down. They want to protect themselves. They want to get out of danger. So that's where the fight and flight activation comes in. Okay. But unfortunately, when the hippocampus has been altered or damaged in the child, and the amygdala in the child is being overly stimulated. So when that fight and or flight happens, it's maladaptive. So what's going to be happening? The child is going to focus more on the emotions rather than being able to critically think about what's going on. So what do I mean? This is what it is. Since the child has a strong connection to the narcissistic parents, there's a strong connection. They may not particularly like the parent at the moment, right? Because the child is like, mommy and daddy is going in on me and I didn't even do anything. Yet there's the connection. There's the bond. Okay, now we can get into trauma bonding, but I'm not going to get into that in the live stream today. But I think you all get the picture. The child is connected to the parents or grandparents who have a narcissistic personality or cluster B personality. So while in all of the drama, the child is going to be more emotional and they may be more prone to becoming reactionary rather than having the pendulum swing over to the critically thinking part of themselves. They may not be able, and especially if the child is under 5 years old. Let's face it, okay? So the child is less likely to critically think and put into perspective what's really going on at that moment, because the hippocampus is being shrunk or is shrinking and is being damaged due to the cortisol hitting it, okay, or going there on to that part of the brain. So this is happening at the same time. The hippocampus and the amygdala is being affected by the hormone called cortisol. So that's going to happen with that child. Okay, so we talked about, or I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream, how even basically the child's development from the DNA reading to their brain structure, okay, the immune system, it's all being altered, it's all, and not for the better, when they are facing high adversity such as narcissistic abuse. So the child is being, they're facing a lot of high adversity right now. Toxic amount of stress the child is experiencing. And yes, we can even be talking about a 5-year-old child. Okay, so when the hippocampus has been damaged, they're not going to really critically think about what's going on and be able to resolve the issue to get themselves out of danger. So the fight and flight is again, it's been activated, but it's maladaptive. It's not very effective. The amygdala is overly stimulated. So even though they have these emotions for the parents, the emotion that they may be strongly feeling, that child may be strongly feeling at that moment, is maybe fear. It may even be, let's just go with fear. Okay, they're definitely going to be feeling one of those primal emotions, because this is where the amygdala rules. The amygdala rules that are primal emotions: love, lust, hatred, and fear. So at that moment, that child is feeling a lot of fear. They're not going to critically think of ways to get themselves out of that situation or to protect themselves or be able to come up with a solution, whereas they're comfortable with and they're satisfactory, okay, or they're satisfied with. So they're going to start probably saying things and doing things that really, has them getting into more hot water, even though in their minds, they're thinking of how to protect themselves. But again, the fight and or flight, that is maladaptive. So when the fight and or flight is being activated, it is maladaptive due to the cortisol hitting the hippocampus and the amygdala and absolutely altering it. So you have the child has an amygdala that is overly sensitive or overly stimulated. Okay, it's working too well. It's working too much. It's way up here. And at the same time, due to the cortisol, the hippocampus is not functioning well enough. So it's way down here. So what is a child to do, right? So I know some of us, I know I do, it's like we can think of those times where we were in trouble when we were children. And in our minds, we were thinking about, how do I get out of this mess? How do I protect myself? And it seems like we became all thumbs and 2 left feet, and our tongues were tied. It's like we couldn't say or do anything to get ourselves out of that situation, whereas we weren't further in trouble. But anyway, when it comes to the narcissistic parent, you really cannot satisfy the narcissistic parent anyway. So even if the child did think of a way, right? And I'm not saying this is not impossible, because some children do know how to maneuver and survive and thrive in a hostile situation, such as a dysfunctional family. Let's make that clear. Basically, what I'm saying is the hippocampus and the amygdala has been altered due to the cortisol, okay? And this, again, toxic amounts of stress in the child. The child is in survival mode most of the time. But again, fight and or flight has been maladaptive. The fight and flight activation is maladaptive. It is not very effective, in other words. Now, when it comes to the child being in a hostile environment, like the dysfunctional family, being run by narcissistic parents and even grandparents, again, the child is in survival mode. So he or she will say and or do whatever they need to do to make sure that they are surviving. Okay, a lot of us know about this, but I really wanted to point that out because sometimes some of us, we may wonder, why is it that we cannot seem to stop thinking about the narcissist and the cluster personality, even though they do a lot of things such as the diabolical tactics. They pull a lot of shenanigans. They do a lot of things that really set us off, right? Yet we can't stop thinking about them. That's because, again, the amygdala has been overly stimulated. What does the amygdala control? Our emotions, the primal emotions I mentioned: love, lust, fear, and hatred. So when we're all emotional about the narcissist and a cluster personality, regardless of their shenanigans and them engaging in some of the most diabolical tactics for narcissistic supply, well, that's why, because again, the amygdala is overly stimulated, whereas the hippocampus is not functioning as well as it ought to function, or is supposed to function. So that means we're not critically thinking about what's going on. So when the narcissist is pulling shenanigans, we're not really thinking about what's going on. Sometimes when we're reactionary, we're also internalizing all of the aftermath of the diabolical tactics for sources of supply and all of the shenanigans being pulled. So we're feeling angry, right? Maybe even resentful. And at the same time, we're sad, right? And the other thing that's going on is that we're not really critically thinking about what's going on in the relationship. What's the theme of the relationship? The theme of the relationship could be that the narcissist and a cluster personality is being very manipulative. Okay, they're every time you turn around, they're telling a lie. Maybe you've even caught them in a lie. The bottom line is you're feeling and thinking some kind of way about what's going on in this dysfunctional relationship, yet you're still co-signing. Some of us are still complying to this. When the hippocampus is not functioning properly and there's an overactive amygdala, you have more than likely you have a person who's in a dysfunctional relationship with a narcissist and a cluster personality and feeling that close connection or that deep connection with him or her, yet they're still co-signing. They're still complying to the dysfunctional relationship because it has been a grooming process. You know, it's a result of a grooming process of the narcissistic parents or grandparents, maybe even both. The child is being groomed. So by the time they become adults, they have all of these dysfunctional relationships with other people who have a narcissistic personality or cluster personality. So it's just a pattern that continues because the child is very familiar with that. A child who's facing high adversity, okay, due to having narcissistic parents and even grandparents, they are very accustomed to that. So again, when they become adults, they don't stem from it. They don't tend to stir from it or deviate from it. So until they learn about the subconscious mind and how it functions, then they find out, wait a minute, I can stop this craziness. I can stop. Not saying that you're crazy or I'm crazy. No, just let's stop. Let's stop. Let's get off this merry-go-round, right? It starts with the subconscious mind. Parents have a lot of influence over the child's subconscious mind, especially the first 7 years of their life. So if there's narcissistic parents, then that child, again, that part of their brain, the amygdala, is overly stimulated. And that part of their brain, the hippocampus, is not functioning properly. So that child is going to more than likely sacrifice themselves for those who are predatory in nature as they grow up. So when they become adults, because they've been groomed to behave this way and to think a particular way, there are certain programs that has been downloaded into the subconscious mind of that child or those children by the narcissistic parent, whose aim is to have the narcissistic supply. So, again, we tend to gravitate towards what's very familiar to us. So by the time we become adults, it's already set in. when you factor in the grooming process of the narcissistic parent, and when you factor in the damaging effects due to the fact that the child has been facing high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. When you factor all that in, it really, it does kind of sound cliche when we hear the statement, it wasn't your fault, even though it can comfort. But when you understand the science behind why it's not your fault, then it's like the world lifts up off your shoulders. And then you can start, gaining your mojo back. You can start tapping into your personal power again. And you don't feel so helpless, and you don't feel like you can never do anything right whenever the narcissist and the cluster personality comes around. And some of us have experienced this as adults. It's like whenever we're doing great until the narcissist or cluster personality comes into the room. And then all of a sudden we can't speak correctly. We're all thumbs. We're 2 left feet. It's like we lose our mojo. Well, in today's live stream, I want to give you some information that help you gain that mojo back, and to, help you have a straighter back and stand a little taller, right? Because really we're talking about the science behind why it's really not your fault. It really is. I mean, other than the obvious, you were children. I was a child, so it's really not your fault, but we want to look at the science behind that. So when it comes to, again, the overactive amygdala and the hippocampus not functioning properly, this has a lot to do with why sometimes we're stuck or seemingly stuck in dysfunctional relationships with individuals who have a cluster B personality or a narcissistic personality, or who tend to have a predatory nature. They can be abusers. An abusive person is not necessarily a narcissist. A person who has a cluster B personality is not necessarily a narcissist. But I'm telling you, every narcissist is abusive, and they have a cluster B personality. Okay. So really wanted to clear that up right there. I've had several people ask me that question. A lot of our star family, has asked me the question, like, what is the difference between the cluster B personality and the narcissist? What's the difference? But it's amazing how this is another thing that's completely overlooked a lot of time. I've even done this. It's like, okay, I'm thinking cluster B personality and narcissist is the same thing. No, the cluster B personality, when we're looking at that, the key word is cluster. When we're looking at the narcissistic personality, it is a cluster of the cluster B personality. It's a symptom of the cluster B personality. So this is why, some people, they just think it's one thing, but it's not. That's why I said every person you meet that is a narcissist, they have a cluster B personality. Every cluster B personality that they are not necessarily a person who's a narcissist. The narcissistic personality is only a symptom or a cluster of the cluster B personality, whereas the cluster B personality is a personality disorder in and of itself. So, it's almost like looking at an outline and then looking at the sub text up under it, or the sub line up under the outline. Okay, so kind of look at it like that. Cognitive dissonance and brain fog are often the result of cortisol adding or reducing neurons from the hippocampus due to persistent stress, which decreases the size of the hippocampus. Now, this is what I was talking about before. How does the cortisol affect the hippocampus, that part of the brain? It damages it. It can even shrink it. So this way, you're not really critically, or a person is not critically thinking about what's going on when the narcissist is pulling shenanigans. They tend to swing, the pendulums tend to go over to the emotional side. Then they become reactionary because the amygdala is overly stimulated. Those are where the emotions are housed: love, lust, fear, and hatred. Okay, so I hope this is really starting to make a little sense. I know I was just so grateful when I came across this research myself a few years ago. So this is very helpful. So by becoming more emotionally stressed and worried while feeling resentment. Okay, let me do that. Let me go back again. Yeah, I got it. By becoming more emotionally stressed and worried while feeling resentment about shenanigans being pulled by the narcissist, one can experience brain fog. So brain fog is when a person may become confused and they may find it very hard to concentrate or focus. Now, again, this is due to how the amygdala and the hippocampus parts of the brain is working. You have one, again, that's way down here is not functioning properly, right? And you have the other part, the amygdala, that's way up here is too much. So you have one that's too much and you have one that's not enough. So what do you do, right? So anyway, just wanted to point out how when a person is feeling resentment or anger towards the narcissist or cluster personality, or the fact that they're pulling shenanigans, they're being had by the narcissist. You know, all this stuff is going on with the narcissist and cluster personality. They're feeling some kind of way about that. Absolutely. There may be anger and resentment. When this is going on for a long period of time, and at the same time, there may be sadness. This person may feel sad. You know, they may have had a lot of, nights where they cried in their pillow or they cried in their beer or drink, right? A lot of incidences where that has occurred. So when this is going on simultaneously for a long time, this person can experience brain fog. They can experience cognitive dissonance. Why is that? Because the hippocampus, again, is not functioning properly. That means the person is not really critically thinking about what's going on. So a person's brain will tend to have them, it will direct them over to their emotional side. Why is that? Because the amygdala is overly stimulated. So when all of the shenanigans and everything is going on, that person may feel resentful. They may feel angry, and they're clear on that. I'm pissed off, right? And on the other hand, they feel sad. They feel helpless. They feel hopeless. They don't feel like they can change the situation. So when that's going on simultaneously for a long period of time, this person can experience brain fog. I hope that makes sense. So that means it's like they're locked. It's like, on one hand, they think to a certain degree about, okay, I'm pissed off, I'm angry. And they're, on the other hand, they're feeling this, they're feeling these emotions, they're having certain thoughts, but because the amygdala is overly stimulated, he or she may at the same time feel helpless. They feel these strong emotions, yet the situation is not changing. They don't feel like they can come up with a solution to resolve that issue. So on one side of the brain, again, the amygdala is overly stimulated. So it's got you all emotional. On the other side of the brain, the hippocampus, or the other part of the brain, the hippocampus is not functioning enough. So it doesn't give you enough juice to get up out that situation, to think critically and say, this is what I'm going to do. And, forget the narcissist. So it doesn't mean this person is something is wrong with this person. I just really wanted to put it into context for everyone on this live stream. This is why sometimes a person feels stuck and stagnant and in the sunken place when it comes to the dysfunctional relationship with narcissists and cluster personalities, because it really is a science behind it. And we can go all the way back to childhood trauma. Some of those unresolved traumatic issues stemming from our childhood. We can go all the way back there and just put everything into context. We can even put into there the subconscious mind, the programming that was downloaded by the narcissistic parents into the child's mind at a very early age. And you put all of that into context, and you can probably begin to see a little bit more clearly why it just seems like you're in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the narcissist and cluster personality, even though you feel certain strong emotions such as fear. You may even feel love for the narcissist. Okay, you may feel some other, those other primal emotions that I was talking about, like hatred, fear. All right. And at the same time, it's like you're having a hard time. You may be having a hard time figuring out exactly how you want to thrive forward. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So it's like, again, the hippocampus is not giving enough juice to have the person go into radical action because they're resolving their issues. They're coming up with solutions. Okay. For one thing, they have the confidence. They feel like they have the confidence. They're like, okay, I don't like what's going on. I don't like what the narcissist is saying and blah, 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 blah. However, this is the solution and I'm going to resolve it for myself. I'm not my only problem solver. I'm my best problem solver. So I'm going to go and get some help. I'm going to talk to somebody I trust because I don't trust the narcissist. They bugging, they tripping, they acting, they wilding out. I love them. I care about them, but I'm not going to let them take me out like that. I'm not going to let them have me miss out on my life. You see what I'm saying? So when the amygdala and the hippocampus is functioning properly, right, then the person can balance what they think and what they feel. And thank goodness this can be done, right? Because I'm not, sharing this information in the live stream to say, oh, it's doom and gloom and forget it. There's no hope. No, quite to the contrary. I had mentioned on the live stream the other night that if you go to a neurologist, they can actually, I'm not saying to do this, but I'm just putting it out there. That's one option, to help with the hippocampus and the amygdala and how it functions. A neurologist can help with that. Okay, let's move forward. But I just wanted to point out, when a person is constantly worrying about the shenanigans, about what the narcissist is doing, and a lot of us have been stuck there. Well, on one hand, we're worried about what they're doing, and on the other, we feel and think a particular way, yet we're still co-signing to the dysfunctional relationship. In other words, nothing is happening that we really are satisfied with, and we feel hopeless. Sometimes we feel hopeless. We feel helpless in that situation. So when that person, they may be obsessed, they may be really focused in on the narcissist and feel all types of emotions. Like they may feel lust, and at the same time, they may feel angry. They may feel resentful of the narcissist. A lot of us has been in that situation, especially a romantic situation with a narcissist and cluster B personality. We feel, on one hand, we feel a strong connection like love and lust. And on the other, we act like we feel like, feel like we really can't stand that person. And it's a very complicated situation. But at the same time, we can simplify it simply by looking at the science behind this. Okay, so it's like, okay, they're focused on the narcissist. The narcissist has new supply, and that person is obsessing over the narcissist. They focus on him or her. The relationship is over. The narcissist has new supply, so they're checking the Facebook. They're driving by the house. They're trying to figure out where this person is. That's obsessively focusing on the narcissist and a cluster B personality. And again, we can go right back to the amygdala and the hippocampus and how it functions. It has a lot to do with it. Okay, so, and again, I want to reiterate how if you have questions, please email. Okay, email me your questions, because I don't think we're going to have time to do a lot of the questions today. I usually like to do that at the end of the live stream. Let me check my time. Yeah, I'm going to have to wrap this up. And I certainly hope you all are enjoying today's live stream. Okay, brain effectiveness can be reduced while the ability to learn becomes very difficult. Whenever the brain, my brain just locked. Okay, let me drink some more water. All right. The brain effectiveness can be reduced while the ability to learn becomes more difficult. Whenever the brain lacks activity due to extreme anxiety, anger, and sadness, one can be kept off balance by choosing to invest in a dysfunctional relationship with narcissists and or those with the cluster B personality. So, once again, when we're talking about how the brain functions, it can become ineffective when we're talking about the cortisol affecting the hippocampus and the amygdala. All right. So that person, even though they feel extreme anxiety, they're in a state of anxiety, and they feel a lot of sadness. They may feel a lot of resentment and anger towards the narcissist, yet they seem to be locked in that relationship. A person may be experiencing brain fog. That means they may not be able to focus on, and I'm not trying to insult anyone when I say this. Please look up brain fog. It's very real. Brain fog is very real. A lot of people can experience it. So on one hand, that person may feel these intense emotions, and on the other hand, they're not able, due to brain fog, they're not able to focus and concentrate on a satisfactory solution to come up out of that situation. Okay, they're not able to do that. The hippocampus is not functioning properly. It's not giving them enough juice. The amygdala is giving them too much juice. It needs to come down a little bit. So when you got one way up here and you got one way down here, they need to come together. They need to balance out. So this is why often in videos, I say balance what you think with what you feel. It's a balance, and it makes a big difference. Okay, this is something I practice. It is a big game changer. And you're less likely to become reactionary, even if you're pissed off at the narcissist and you want to tell them a few choice words. The difference is you're not being reactionary because you're not really, because you're choosing. So if you choose to give him or her a piece in your mind, then you don't feel so helpless. You don't feel like they've one up you or whatever, because you're making the choice. You're saying, yeah, I want to say a few choice words to you. And you've already resolved the issue for yourself. For example, the narcissist goes in on you and they say a few choice words or whatever, and you may choose to respond. You've already jumped ahead, right? You respond to him or her. You're able to clearly tell them exactly what you think and what you feel, and you've already been able to focus on a solution to make sure you're not in that situation anymore. The narcissist trying to goat you into an argument. And even if they try, they'll think twice, because you were able to practice self-preservation, emotional discipline, assertion, and personal boundaries. That's the best narcissistic repellent that I know. That's a great narcissistic repellent. So they may think twice, and they may start looking at you like, okay, what happened to you? And they may become very threatened and challenged, because now you're getting a little bit better. You're gaining your mojo back. You're feeling better about your life, yourself. You're starting to, you're just starting to gain your mojo back. So the narcissist and cluster personality, they may think twice about trying to pull shenanigans. It's not about you trying to control the narcissist. It's about understanding that you cannot control the narcissist and they cannot control you. That's what this is about as well. You know, they cannot. But when a person is experiencing brain fog, once again, they may be confused. They may have a hard time concentrating, and they may have a hard time focusing. So when the amygdala and the hippocampus has been altered and they're not functioning properly, that makes learning a little bit more difficult, because a person is not able to concentrate. Okay, they're not able to retain the information that's coming in. What's the information? The information is that the narcissist and a cluster personality is behaving badly. Okay, that's the information. So that person, even though on the surface they see that the narcissist is behaving badly, but internally, when it comes to their emotions, it may not be as clear. Okay, so they may tend to become reactionary, and at the same time, they're co-signing the dysfunctional relationship. And there you have it. The situation doesn't change. Okay. So one can be kept off balance by choosing to invest in a dysfunctional relationship with narcissists and those who have a cluster personality. Absolutely. The person can maintain, they will not be able to maintain their overall well-being. It's an imbalanced, it's imbalancing. So when I say think about, think critically when it's time to really look at what the narcissist is doing. Instead of just being emotional, try to, practice and try to think more critically about what's going on. Balance what you think with what you feel. There's your balancing right there. It's a big game changer. And more than likely, the narcissists, they're going to realize, wait a minute, maybe I need to think twice. Not that the narcissist has any insight anyway. So scratch what I just said. The narcissist and cluster B personality, they usually don't, they lack foresight anyway. So they don't tend to think about their mistakes. They don't tend to sit and think about what they have done to cause other people to be grieved or vexed by him or her. So forget that. You can't control the narcissist. I can't control no one can control the narcissist. And the kicker is that everybody knows that the narcissist can't control anybody else except the narcissist. Okay, the narcissist doesn't even get that. But, they tend to lack foresight anyway. They tend to not learn from their mistakes. All right. So those who have faced high adversity in childhood usually show signs of childhood trauma, therefore eventually suffer particular health issues later in life. So some of those health issues are post-traumatic stress injury and complex post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress injury. I usually like to say post-traumatic stress injury, anxiety, depression, addiction, suicidal. They may have or end up with heart disease, lung cancer, and hepatitis. So these are just a few of the health issues that a person may face later in life due to having been facing high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse as a child. Okay, now let's get into the signs of narcissistic abuse and trauma. So we're going to compare these signs. So when you compare the signs of the effects of narcissistic abuse and trauma, right, you can begin to see how this is a person who has faced high adversity. Again, when you compare the signs of trauma and you compare the signs of narcissistic abuse, I just don't really think there's an argument, not much of an argument. This person has faced high adversity. So signs of trauma, denial, shock. They may have or develop an avoidant personality. There may be guilt. There may be shame, fear, numbness. The emotional, becoming emotionally numb. There may be some sadness. They may become very guarded. So these are signs of trauma, which to me is a sign of a person facing high adversity. Now let's go over to the narcissistic abuse. What are some of the signs there? The person may become obsessed over how to please the narcissist. They may lack the ability to trust those who are trustworthy. So a person who even shows you or I or someone else who has a traumatic childhood, even after they prove that they've been trustworthy or they are trustworthy, we still may have a hard time trusting him or her. So even when a person proves that they're trustworthy, some people who have childhood trauma as adults, or some people who are adult children of narcissists, that's what I wanted to say, they may have a hard time trusting, even people who show themselves trustworthy. This is very common, by the way. They may become overly focused on their own mistakes. They idealize the narcissist. So another sign of narcissistic abuse is they may have abandonment issues. They may be hypervigilant. They're always guarded, looking for something to happen when there's really no clear danger of anything happening. But this person may be highly alert or, again, hypervigilant. Difficulty sleeping, question their own sanity. A lot of narcissists and cluster B personalities, they like to use the gaslight technique. This is one classic way to know that the person more than likely has been gaslighted by the narcissist or cluster B personality, is that they do not trust themselves. They question their own sanity. Okay, and it happens a lot. So when there's a background that this person has narcissistic parents that used to gaslight them a lot, well, no wonder as an adult, they're going to second guess themselves. They're not going to have a lot of confidence in their own abilities. They're going to feel unworthy. They're not going to feel like they're deserving of anything good, yet alone anyone good, or anyone who can love or care about them or have their love reciprocated anyway. A person is probably not going to have those things because as children, they were facing high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. They were being gaslit by their own narcissistic parents. They were being gaslit by their own narcissistic grandparents, possibly. So when you put all this into context, again, it goes beyond that cliche statement of it wasn't your fault. So now we're getting into the science of it, because it's obvious that it wasn't your fault because the children do not set the tone in the relationship. The parent-child relationship, the tone is always, for that relationship, is always set by the parents. The child cannot set the tone. That's impossible. So other than the obvious, why it wasn't your fault, why it wasn't my fault, now we're getting down to the science of it. Why wasn't it your fault? Okay, so again, children don't set the tone for the relationship of the parent and the child. So let's get into the tools. Tool number one, research what options are available to you in order to build and work your support base. A lot of my stars already know how much I just rah-rah about that support base. It is imperative. Okay, I have a support base today. There have been a few groups that I have participated in the past. They were helpful, support groups. And what I want to say about the support groups is that I think it's best to do as much research as possible, gain as much information about narcissistic abuse as possible, especially when it comes to joining or being a part of or participating in a group that has advertised that it can help you deal with narcissistic abuse. I mean, there's some false advertisements out there. I'm not going to call anybody out, but it's just best to gain as much information as possible about narcissistic abuse. So by choosing to increase your knowledge on narcissism, you can make wise choices on who might be the best counselor, life coach, and or mentor for you. You will be, after all, you're going to be the one navigating the support base. Now, a lot of you have heard me say this. You're going to be the one navigating the support base. So when it comes down to that support base, the first step is to draw up the blueprint. The blueprint is when you are just looking at where are you right now, financially, emotionally, physically, where are you? How are you? Can you handle being in a classroom setting of maybe about 50 people? If you cannot, that means more than likely your support base is going to consist of going one-on-one with someone, like a mentor, like a life coach, somebody like that. That's when you're going to begin to ease into being able to maybe down the line go into a support group or, something like that. But the blueprint is basically for the purpose of finding out where you are right now. What can you handle right now? What can you absolutely not handle right now? And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. So the first step to building and working a support base is drawing that blueprint. Okay, you're going to need that. You're going to need a constructive outlet to deal with all of the shenanigans of the narcissist, the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. You're going to need that support. You're going to need that. Isolation is not the answer. So, you're going to be the one navigating all of this. Let's move forward. Next tool. Find constructive ways that help you to relax, reduce stress, and manage any anger that you might have due to painful childhood experiences. Absolutely. You're going to need that constructive outlet that I mentioned. So find a way to reduce stress. There are stress management classes. There's stress management information out there. There's ways that you can become more mindful. There's information about mindfulness. Mindfulness basically is another way of saying that you are practicing emotional discipline, personal boundaries, self-preservation, and assertion. You're becoming mindful of what you need in order to thrive forward. You're becoming mindful of what you need in order to focus on your own healing progress instead of trying to supply the narcissist who doesn't appreciate you anyway. So you're just switching that around a little bit. You're investing in yourself this time. So find constructive ways that you can express that. You're going to need that. Next tool, practice mindfulness and patience as you continue to thrive forward. Your healing progress is not a contest. It isn't. So don't think that you're going to rush this. You don't have to rush this. Time is really not of the essence in this case. You have been through quite an ordeal. Absolutely. Don't belittle that. The narcissist will have you belittle what you've gone through, especially, if there's a childhood trauma. If that's the situation, they're really going to have you belittle. And at the same time, they want you to focus on that so they can feed off of that. It's really wild how the narcissist and cluster personality pulls shenanigans and they engage in diabolical tactics, all for the narcissist to supply and to make sure that their false self-image is thriving and surviving. It's amazing the crazy stuff that they will, or the crazy lengths that they will go to in order to accomplish that. And all the while, they're not remorseful. They don't have any empathy. Or, sometimes they may have some sympathy, but they definitely don't have any empathy for anyone. So, don't belittle what you've gone through. Placing any added pressure on yourself to heal is not healing at all. Because basically, when a person is coping, they're not necessarily healing, because coping mechanisms are not always positive or constructive. Some people have self-medicated. I'm not judging. I'm just pointing out how sometimes when a person is just coping, they're not healing. They're not thriving forward. Okay, so just wanted to point that out. Remember that your life has purpose. Absolutely. A lot of my stars know I say that. Your life does have purpose. My life has purpose. Okay, and the first thing that you can state, sometimes when you ask that question, what is my purpose in life? Answer it by first stating that you are alive. Your life has purpose. And that will get you well on your way. Some of us trying to figure out, what are we here for? Simply state, I'm alive. I'm here. My life has purpose. And just take it from there. Okay. So, all right. Last tool, take time out to enjoy the silence, solitude, while keeping a journal. You can have a tape recorder and speak into the tape recorder. Get those feelings out. What have you experienced? Express that. Record it. Our lives are being recorded anyway. So if you want to speak into the mic or you want to speak into the tape recorder, do that. Or you can type on the computer. That's another way to journal. Another way to journal is to place pen to pad. You can absolutely do that. So those are just various ways that you can keep a journal and express what you have experienced as far as like narcissistic abuse. Don't belittle what you've experienced. Okay, there's probably been too many people that have tried to influence you to do that anyway. So you need that constructive outlet. So take time out to enjoy the silence. Take time out to enjoy the solitude. Some of us have busy lives. I get it. I used to be a workaholic. Okay, sometimes I still kind of got to bring it down a notch. But enjoying the silence, enjoying the solitude is what I do every now and then. I take some time out for that. Walking out in nature, enjoying the solitude. Going to the spa, enjoying the solitude. Or just going to a part of your house where it's just you, your candles, your incense, some nice music or whatever, and just enjoy the solitude. I don't care if you take 5 minutes out to do that. It makes a difference because this will help place certain things into perspective for you. Okay, and this is another great way to balance how the hippocampus and the amygdala works. Okay, now I'm not trying to be your neurologist right now. I'm just kind of putting something out there from my own personal experience. It helps to balance that. Okay, so just is amazing. And, some people say meditation doesn't work. Some people, they debate that, whether or not meditation works. Well, when you're talking about mindfulness, meditation is a part of that. So when you take that time out to enjoy the solitude and enjoy some silence, even if it's 5 minutes a day or every other day, keeping that journal, you can, again, use the tape recorder. You don't have to place the pen to pad, or you can do both. However you want to do that journal, just get that out of you. Express what you have experienced. That's all a part of mindfulness. And you can, interject that meditation right in there. Okay, it's all going to help balance things out. So that way the narcissists, they won't know what hit them. It's like, what happened to you? You've changed. Yeah, And you can just say, no, I'm gaining my mojo back. I'm coming back to me. I'm just starting to wake up again, right? But anyway, I really wanted to share a lot of those things with you, and I certainly hope it has been very helpful. Now, I want to mention something before we end the live stream. Now, when it comes to signs of complex PTSD, and it comes to symptoms and signs of post-traumatic stress injury, and some of those signs are a little bit different. Some of them are the same, but some of them are different. Nightmares and flashbacks. Those are two similar signs of both complex PTSD and PTSD. Okay, but again, there's a few differences, and I want to invite everybody to please, or suggest to please, look that up. It's in the description box below. It's in the references and resources. Okay, so check. It's going to take a little time to look through some of this stuff, but I think you'll find a lot of the information very helpful. But when it comes to the complex PTSD, the symptoms of complex PTSD is not a diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5. It's not. The diagnosis criterion for PTSD symptoms is in the DSM-5. So whenever a mental health care practitioner or counselor that you may be seeing right now for PTSD, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, because they're under oath. They have to adhere to the diagnosis criterion of the DSM-5. They cannot treat anything that is not a diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5. So when we're having symptoms of complex PTSD, this is when we have to become a little bit more creative in how to deal with that. Okay, now I've already mentioned some of that. Journaling, meditation, that can deal with some of the symptoms of complex PTSD. That's an alternative for you, because the counselor, the mental health practitioner, or the doctor, they cannot treat anything that is not a diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5. They cannot do that. So it's not that they're keeping you out of the loop. It's not that they're intentionally not treating you. It's just that they're under oath. They have to adhere to the diagnosis criterion of the DSM-5. So when it comes to complex PTSD, once again, it is not a diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5. So that means you have to become a little bit more creative. And when you invest in yourself, you just have to be willing to do some research and find out what works for you when it comes to complex PTSD symptoms. And again, there is a way to do this. That's when the balancing act comes in again. All right. So let me also point out, now there are some elements, or there's 3 elements or types of therapy for trauma, for PTSD symptoms. So this is basically the treatment that is available for symptoms of PTSD. The first one is present-centered therapy. The second one is prolonged exposure. The third one is cognitive restructuring. Those are 3 elements that's usually provided for treatment for symptoms of PTSD. These will not work for symptoms of complex PTSD. That's what I wanted to point out. It's just not, it's not going to work. Okay, so those 3 elements. Yeah, those 3 elements or types of therapy for post-traumatic stress injury will not work for complex post-traumatic stress injury. Okay, just really wanted to point that out. Let's see. I would also like to point out some other difficulties a person may face due to chronic trauma. Okay, now this is very similar. This is a person who's facing high adversity. Okay, so no, matter of fact, let me skip that. Let me just get down to the treatment for complex PTSD. Let me get down to the treatment for that. All right, so I'm going to read from my notes here. Standard evidence-based treatments for PTSD are effective for treating PTSD that occurs following chronic trauma, At the same time, treating complex PTSD often involves addressing interpersonal difficulties and the specific symptoms mentioned above. Dr. Herman contends that recovery from complex PTSD requires restoration of control and power for the traumatized person. Survivors can become empowered by healing relationships, which create safety, allow for remembrance and mourning, and promote reconnection with everyday life. So these are the 4 things that can help a person with complex PTSD. And that is remembrance, okay? Basically allowing yourself to grieve. And a lot of my videos, I place that as one of the tools. Allow yourself to grieve. So if you have complex PTSD symptoms, allow yourself to grieve. Another thing that you can do is to promote, to reconnect. I'll put it like that. I'm going to use my words now. You can reconnect with everyday life. Go out in nature. Take small steps, right? To get your mojo back, to become comfortable. It's going to be an adjustment, because when we're accustomed to a certain thing and when we're switching up to something else, it's going to cause a little bit of stress and discomfort. So that's the second thing you can do. Take small steps to get your mojo back. Start taking a little bit more calculated risk. Come out of your comfort zone. In other words, take small steps to do that. That's the second thing you can do when it comes to helping yourself with complex PTSD. You can create safety. So in other words, if you have a narcissist and a cluster personality that's around you, you're probably not feeling emotionally safe with him or her. You may not want to continue to be around a narcissist, basically, because emotionally, you're not going to feel safe. So you may want to try to, gradually come back from that, gradually step away from that. The narcissist and cluster personality, they're not going to provide any emotional safety. You're not going to feel emotionally safe with him or her. They're not trustworthy, for goodness sakes. So again, that's the third thing when it comes to complex PTSD symptoms. That's how you can help yourself, is make sure that you are around people or you're in an environment where you feel emotionally safe. Last one. Okay, I may have been 5, but let's see if I can find it. Yes, of course. I should have known that one. Having healing relationships. That's the 4th thing that you can help yourself. And I think I pretty much already touched on it when I was talking about emotional safety. Make sure you're around people that you feel that they're trustworthy. There's some emotional safety. All right. So those are some of the things that you can do right now. Okay. Then when it comes to complex PTSD, and I mentioned something about a neurologist. Okay. So I'm not telling you to do that, but that's an option as well, because they deal with the hippocampus and they deal with the brain, right? And how it functions. So that would be another thing that you can probably do. Now, some of the symptoms of complex PTSD: emotional regulation, okay, consciousness, self-perception, distorted. All right. Distorted perceptions of the perpetrator. See, a little bit of water helps. Relations with others, one's system of meaning. So these are some of the additional symptoms that are seen in complex PTSD. Emotional regulation. They may include persistent sadness, suicidal thoughts, explosive anger, or inhibited anger. Now, we talked about that earlier when I was talking about how a person, they may feel resentful towards the narcissist. And at the same time, there's an emotional connection. So they may feel stuck. There may be some brain fog there. They're for a long period of time, they're feeling sad and resentful and angry about the narcissist. And at the same time, they may not be able to focus in order to come up with a solution that is satisfactory to him or her to get up out of that situation, okay, or to change that situation. And again, that's brain fog. So I mentioned that before. So consciousness includes forgetting traumatic events, reliving traumatic events, or having episodes in which one feels detached from one's mental processes or body. Disassociation. I mentioned that in the live stream the other night. This is one of the coping mechanisms of a person who has faced high adversity as a child. Okay, this is going to be happening. This is one of the coping mechanisms, is to dissociate or disconnect. Okay, so self-perception may include helplessness, shame, guilt, stigma, and a sense of being completely different from other human beings. This again is the complex PTSD symptoms. Distorted perceptions of the perpetrator. Okay, examples include, giving away total power to the perpetrator, becoming preoccupied with the relationships to the perpetrator. In this case, we're talking about the narcissist. So being obsessed, with the narcissist, or how to please him or her. Next, relations with others. Examples include isolation, distrust, or a repeated search for a rescuer. So this person, they may want to be rescued a lot, or they may be seeking others out to rescue, like the narcissist. They may want to be rescued by the narcissist, or they're if they're not doing that, they're rushing to the narcissist to save the narcissist, thinking they can save him or her, change him or her. This sounds familiar? Yeah, a lot of us have done this. So this is another thing that's associated with complex PTSD symptoms. One's systems of meanings, may include a loss of sustaining faith or a sense of hopelessness and despair. So a person may sink way down in the sunken place with this one. They may be in deep despair. They feel like they're helpless, because when I mentioned earlier about just feeling like you're in between a rock and a hard place, this is very common when it comes to the narcissist and cluster personality and the relationship with him or her, which is very toxic, very dysfunctional. So I'm going to end, in conclusion, I'm going to say this. When it comes to the narcissist and a cluster personality, it's just very dangerous to have a relationship with him or her, especially if you have a background in childhood trauma, especially if you have parents who were narcissists and cluster personalities, even grandparents who are narcissists and cluster personalities. It's just, the narcissist and cluster personality, it's just not a good idea to be around them and not give them place in your personal life. We can't help it that when we go out into the world and we're doing our thing, going to work, going to school, or engaging in projects and doing life, right? Just doing our lives. We're going to bump into people who have cluster B personalities and narcissists. That cannot be avoided. And it's not healthy to try and avoid it by becoming isolated either, right? In your personal life, this is where your personal power comes back in. You have say so. Are you going to give space to the narcissist and the cluster B personality in your own life? You don't have to. You have that personal power, right? So you can make that choice. When it comes to, again, just every day and going out and about and interacting with other people and doing our thing, we're going to run into people who have a cluster B personality or a narcissistic personality, but we don't have to give them space in our personal life, in our world. We don't have to do that. And I know some people are saying, well, I have children with this person. The same applies. You don't have to give them space in your world. Okay, what's your world? So some people might say, well, I have children with this person. The same still applies. You don't have to give them space in your life. Not in your world is what I'm saying. In your personal, that deepest part of yourself, in your world. You don't have to give the narcissist any space there. Yes, you co-parent with children. But is that your entire world? Is that your entire essence? Is that your entire being? No, it's not. You're a parent, yes. You don't have to give the narcissist that very intimate place in your, you don't have to give them that. I hope that makes sense. So I just really wanted to point that out. I certainly hope you all have enjoyed this live stream. And I was trying to get in as much as possible. A lot of my stars know I don't like to just come on the live stream and just say, okay, I showed up for about 30 minutes and that's the end of the live stream. Even though I've seen some YouTube channels do that. And I'm like, huh? But then I try not to be too long-winded either. All right. Okay, let me get into the live stream. Thank goodness. All right. Redemption songs. Hello. Welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for sharing this info and your support. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And you're welcome. Janisa, welcome to the live stream. I'm so glad you joined us. Janisa. Now, if I butcher anybody's name, I apologize in advance. Is it Agenia? Hello, Agenia. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, but hi, welcome to the live stream. Hello, Turbo Kid. Turbo Kid TB. Hi, welcome to the live stream. Keep up the truth. Your words have helped tremendously. Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much for that. Okay, guys, I am going to have to wrap this up pretty quickly. And let's see, I had somewhere to be by 5, but I definitely wanted to do this live stream with you all today. Coming up on my time. Ellie Wynn, welcome to the live stream. Christopher Lee, welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for joining us. Empaths are very beautiful people. I think they're some of the best people on the planet. Hello, Black Phoenix. Welcome to the stream. Dawn Elizabeth, welcome to the stream. Recovery with Cresta, welcome to the stream. JC, welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for joining us. Stacy J, welcome to the stream. My goodness, I'm so glad that you all were able to join me today and you're interacting with each other. Welcome to the stream, Mary Williams. Adrian, the Gemini, welcome to the stream. I love the twins, by the way. Oh, I love Geminis. Thank you so much, Gemini. Okay. And I want to apologize to everybody. Usually at the end of the stream, I like to answer questions, but today I'm not going to have time for that. No worries. We're going to have a live stream coming up again. The last 2 months, I wasn't able to do any live streams. I mean, I don't mind saying that, but actually, we're going to have another live stream here shortly. This is a topic that I think that a lot of people will find very important. And it just seems, just from the comments, some of the emails that I've received from some of you, this is a topic that seems to be very important. And just some of my experience, you know, some of my experiences with this is why I decided to do this live stream with this particular topic. But again, I want to just apologize. I'm not going to be able to answer any questions. I'm coming up on my time, and I have somewhere I have to be very shortly. But no worries. I'm going to join you all again for another live stream very soon. Okay, and on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to probably start reaching out to some of you for to become a monitor. But I haven't really come up with any you know, problems right now as far as like that. But anyway, I don't want to speak it into existence, but I may be pointing out to some of you that I may be, you know, asking for monitors here shortly. Let's see. Somebody said, okay, Ellie Wynn, Leo. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I love Leos too. I've just always gotten along with Leos and Geminis. So yeah, very good. Okay, guys, I'm going to have to cut out now. And thank you so much for joining me for this live stream. Stay tuned for more vlogs and stay tuned for more videos. More videos will be coming out tonight because, you know, usually the days are Sundays and Thursdays that I put out new videos. Now, sometimes I'll put out a vlog or two in between those 2 days. But tonight, there's going to be some more videos that I will be uploading. So stay tuned for those. All right. Okay. Mwah. Thank you guys and gals so much and take care.